public hearing of City Council for Monday, February 22nd to order. And it's my pleasure to open the public hearing, and I'll ask our corporate officer to read the notice of the public hearing aloud.
Good morning. This public hearing is being held to hear from anyone that may be affected by the proposed amendments to both the city's official community plan bylaw and zoning bylaw. The purpose of the OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4480 is to replace the existing floodplain map with the revised natural assets map, and also to update the natural hazards development permit area. Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4481 adds a new floodplain map as Schedule C, a riparian hazards map as Schedule D, and a new flood construction level map as Schedule E. The zoning amendment also provides updates to the flood control requirements in relation to these new maps. There were also new definitions relating to the floodplain and clarifications to the maximum combined floor area for accessory buildings and structures in residential zones. Following the first two readings and the required notification, two text amendments were identified. The agricultural land reserve layer has been updated in Schedule I of the OCP bylaw, and a reference to South Dawson Creek was added to Section 2.2 of the zoning bylaw. And there were no additional written comments received.
Thank you, Brenda. And the summary of the public consultations then, do we have a verbal report for them?
Right. The planner has since left the city, but he gave me an update on the public information sessions that were held. A Realtors and Insurers information session was held on Friday, February 5th at 10 a.m. It was well received by everyone and included approximately 20 participants. Questions received at this session related to infrastructure upgrades to 102nd Avenue and 8th Street. A second virtual information session was held for the affected property owners on Friday, February 5th at 1:30 p.m. This session had approximately 25 participants and also included questions related to infrastructure upgrades. Additional questions included why regulations were not in place in the past as to when people built their houses, and also comments that culverts under 102nd Avenue caused unnecessary flooding. City staff explained that the regulations were designed to be based on current day information to adapt to the risk. City staff further explained that infrastructure projects are ongoing or anticipated at 102nd Avenue, which will help mitigate flooding but may not prevent it. And that is the update provided by the planner.
Thank you, Brenda. And so I understand we have a delegation this morning. Blair, do you want to introduce?
All right, thank you, Your Worship. We do have somebody that has shown up to engage on this one. I believe that although that our COVID protocol is clear, there was some confusion based on could you come and approach council. We have an individual. I think it would be certainly worthwhile to hear from the individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to listen in.
Oh!
I just want to get the details.
I apologize. Okay. Well, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And so with that, then for a first time, I will call for comments. And for a second time, any comments? And for a third time, any comments? So now, so for clarity, the process that we go through is we have the public meetings and consultations, and then at the this point where we have the council then would hear the results of that feedback from those public consultations, and then today any correspondence or delegations that would like to address council to give some additional feedback is the final kind of piece of this. So this is the kind of conclusion of it. There probably won't be any further discussion, and I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Maybe I misunderstood the letter. I thought the questions were be submitted by February 12th, and then they were going to be talked about today at this meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Go ahead, Brenda.
That's correct. Any questions that were would have been received would have been dealt with, but there were no questions put forward.
Okay.
Thank you. And so for the third time, we call for comments. So thank you. We'll take now the opportunity to close the public hearing. And at this point now, we will open the regular meeting of City Council with Committee of the Whole for Monday, February 22nd. And I'll call the meeting to order. Any delegations? And new councillor business. Council? Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll try and be quick. I just wanted to update council on my activity with the Northeast Regional Community Foundation, specifically to bring to their attention the creation of the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, which is a grant program being funded, and it is $31 million available to pretty much any nonprofit, local government, and post-secondary institution, and it is intended to focus on helping communities respond to identified needs arising from the impacts of COVID, focusing specifically on creating safe and vibrant public spaces, improved mobility options, and increasing digital solutions. So I'll send that email out to my colleagues following the meeting, and if they would help it trickle down through their various community contacts, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything further from Council? Any other Councillor business? So we'll move to minutes, and we have the minutes of our public consultation session of Council for February 4th, 2021 for adoption. Move. Councillor Kemp, second Councillor Earl. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And the minutes of our regular meeting of Council for February 8th, 2021 for adoption. Move. Councillor Wilbur, second Councillor Kemp. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Was there any business arising out of any of the minutes for anyone? Correspondence, item 6. 6.1, we have a letter from Chris Richards, President of the Dawson Creek and District Chamber of Commerce, regarding a request to have a council liaison. And so if, just as a background, I want to just give a little bit of an update. I did have a meeting with the Chamber and their directors, executive director, about a week ago, and we talked about the NCLGA entering into an MOU with the various northern chambers, and the discussion came about our position on that, and I hadn't seen it before, I hadn't received it from our director at the NCLGA, but we got into the discussion about having a liaison. The chamber thought it was very worthwhile, and had now brought it forward, obviously after that discussion. So I know that I think it's worthwhile, and I'd like to bring it forward then for council. Councillor Wilbur?
Actually, you were a little fast. I put it on under business
Okay.
arising for
All right.
minutes, so can I back up to that?
Sure.
There's just an error in the minutes from the public consultation. I was not actually in attendance, so it shows that I am.
Thank you.
That was it. Thank you.
Okay, so in discussion with Councillor Kemp, you're interested in sitting on the board, and so would we therefore, council, make a motion that we would appoint Councillor Kemp as our liaison to the chamber? Councillor Wilbur, move. Second. Councillor Earl, any discussion? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you, Councillor. We appreciate you volunteering. Item 7, 6.2, we have a letter from Dale Campbell, President of the South Peace Mile Zero Park Society, regarding the closure order for Rotary Lake, and we have a letter from Dale. Councillor Wilbur, go ahead.
Receive for discussion?
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kemp, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Go ahead, Councillor Wilbur.
I realize that, they need something to move forward. What had some concern for me in the letter was the option of digging a trench, because I believe Rotary Lake floods from the creek every year in the spring or when water's high. So I'm thinking that if there's a trench or a culvert in there, it's just going to encourage water to come into that space. Unfortunately, it is what it is. I'm not beyond allowing them to fill it in and repurpose that space for something else. And I'm not sure what my colleagues think, but I did have concern about the idea of a trench or a culvert and think that would just encourage more water to come into that area.
Blair?
Thank you, through you, your worship. So it is intended mostly not so much for the floods in the spring, but as the rain comes, every time it rains and the facility fills up, we have to drain it, or South Peace Mile Zero Park Society has to drain it. So if there was a trench, for instance, it would fill irregardless, but when the flood was down, it would recede back into the creek and go that way. If that was the chosen route that we take, there's a couple of items there, but I know that the Mile Zero Park Society is looking for some assistance from the city because the order is actually directed at the city as well, as I understand it. Ross?
Go ahead, Ross.
Thank you, through your worship. That's correct. And just wanted to note that council has approved a budget this year to have a review rather of Rotary Lake and determine, next steps with respect to that basin. So my hope is that we will gather Mile Zero Park Society, Rotarians, some interested public citizens, and just have some general discussions about how we'll move that piece forward. So.
Thank you. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the letter from the Mile Zero Park Society, and I tend to agree it's time to begin looking at a permanent decommissioning of that area. It was one thing to have them pumping it out when we were holding out the hope that we would eventually be able to find some resolution with Northern Health on how we could get the park back up and running. But now that that decision's been made, and I think having them continue to go to the expense of pumping it out, what is in essence an obsolete piece of infrastructure, is just costing them money needlessly. So I am in favor of moving towards the decommissioning as part of the broader repurposing of that area. I'm not sure what that looks like, and certainly what costs are associated, but it's a worthwhile thing to start pursuing.
So then we would direct administration to deal with assist the South Peace Mile Zero Park Society to deal with Northern Health to allow us to do some temporary work until we understand the future of the use of the park. Blair?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Yes, if we work with the Mile Zero Park Society and come up with a resolve to the water retention issue within there, we could then have Northern Health lift the order, I believe, Ross, is the process that we will look to. And then we would carry on with what the future holds, whether a redevelopment, for instance. I know there's been discussion about a water park. If there's a new water park facility, does it go there? People are concerned about a floodplain. Can it be built? Should we look at another area? But we do have to come up with some option to begin the decommissioning of the actual bowl at Rotary Lake. And a couple of things. One is either look at filling it. The other is look at temporary drain over to the creek. But anything further, Ross, on that?
Thank you, through your worship. Yeah, I think important to touch base with Northern Health, and I think at this point of time, we do look at some interim mitigation just to get the water out of that basin, but I think there has to be a larger conversation with respect to, how and when we fill that in and move it forward. But we're definitely, I met with some representatives from Urban Systems next week, and we will start a public consultation in the very near future.
Thank you for that. So a motion then, we direct administration to work with South Peace Mile Zero Park Society to mitigate the aspect of the draining of the pool on an ongoing basis until a solution is found to the long-term plans for the facility. Councillor Wilbur, second. Councillor Kemp. Any discussion? Any questions? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, administration. 6.3, we have a letter from Caitlin Treble, Program Director at the Nowickan Friendship Center, regarding an NDIT grant funding for the Kitstikan Community Garden and Events Plaza. Councillor Parslow?
Sorry to interrupt. I pressed my button because I wanted to speak further on the matter because we've dealt with one
Okay.
aspect of the letter. We haven't dealt with the second. They're basically asking for some information concerning water supply to the Rotary Lake area. So I was wondering if we could, is there a need to direct staff to do that, or will that just happen?
Thank you. Councillor, Blair?
Through you, your worship, we will work with them on that. It's based on that should consideration be given for a water park, for instance, down there. Is there a water supply that would meet? Are there things such as that? So in our discussions with South Peace Mile Zero Park Society, we'll definitely address that issue.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So on to the 6.3, the letter from Caitlin Treble. Councillor Parslow?
I would like to move that we support this project by supporting their application to the NDIT Cultural Infrastructure Program Fund.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur? Discussion?
Just a
Go ahead.
comment. The Bergeron Narrowton Friendship Center, if you haven't visited it, I would encourage you to do that. I've been there a few times, and they have great plans. It's going to be a great asset to the community, both culturally and both from the point of view of care of people. And I commend Joanne and her group for what's happening down there.
Thank you. Yeah, they've done a great job, and it's going to be exciting to see the development of that corner. Further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Item 7, reports. 7.1, we have report number 21029 from the airport manager regarding Sealand Flight Lease Proposal 2021. Councillor Javetkov?
I'll move the report number 21-029 from the airport manager Sealand Flight Lease Proposal 2021 be received. Further, that council approve a lease agreement with Sealand Flight, including room number 206 and 210 in the airport tower. $5,950 and 4 parking stall rentals, $480 for the term of 1 year beginning January 1st, 2021, for a total annual fee of $6,430.
Thank you, Councillor Javetkov. Second. Councillor Wilbur, any discussion? So great, obviously great news to see this activity at the airport and this interest by Sealand Flight. Obviously, every time we have more activity at the airport, and that's a benefit to the airport, and certainly the more times planes take off and the more times plane land, that's a benefit to that operation out there, and certainly to see Sealand Flight come in and establish their operations at the Dawson Creek and District Airport. I'm really pleased to see them and welcome them into the community, and really appreciate their support of the community and their confidence in the community. Any further comments, Council? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. On to item 8, bylaws, and we have report number 21024 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding our 2021 to 25 financial plan bylaw number 4496, 2021. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move the first recommendation, that report number 21-024 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding 2021 to 2025 financial plan bylaw 4496-2021 be received. Further, the 2021 to 2025 financial plan bylaw number 4496-2021 be given first 3 readings.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kempf? Discussion. Council? Councillor Earl, or you're just, you're
No,
still?
I'm just
okay.
hanging out here,
Thanks.
sorry.
So obviously, to be in a position where we're today, February, middle of February, to be able to be in a position where we're given third reading on our financial plan bylaw is very, very cool, I think, in terms of being at that stage where normally you're at the end of April that we're getting it completed. So congratulations, compliments to administration, to senior staff, to all the council, everybody who's worked so hard to get us to this point. And Flavia, thank you so much. You did a great job on preparing our financial plan once again this year, and we appreciate it. And thank you. And it's exciting to me to be in a position at the end of February where we're in this state. So. Any further comments, Council? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Earl, go ahead.
And I would further move this recommendation number 2, that the 2021 to 2025 financial plan bylaw number 4496/2021 be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur. Discussion? Councillor Parslow?
Looking at Schedule C, summary of capital projects. Just to refresh my memory, just a couple of questions. The drainage, the allocation of $800,000 a year. What? I'm not getting that confused with the flood mitigation, because that's in the line above, right? What is that about? I've forgotten.
So, through your worship, the allocation and the drainage is what we allocate to any of the road projects that we do, as well as projects that are identified in the drainage master plan. So we typically use the road projects as drivers to see where we're going and what we're doing, and if there's anything underneath that road or anything that ties into that, and then we use the master plan to help steer those projects. So
Go ahead.
Supplementary question would be, is that the same thing as storm sewage?
yeah, storm sewer
Thank you.
drainage.
That's my
Yep.
second question. PRA allocation to capital. So, and I apologize if it's buried somewhere else in the report, but what is the would that percentage be? I mean, I'm pleased to see the, if I call it the gradual escalation. I'm just curious about what, let's say, the 2025 figure is as a percentage of the total grant.
Sorry, Flavia, I'll just be a minute. There you go.
Thank you, through your worship. On page 4 of the report, there is the PRA allocation projection for 10 years, where we split the percentage of how much is going to debt service, how much allocation capital. So for 2025, it's estimating 56% of equipment with capital and equipment pool allocated to the capital area from PRA.
Yeah. Okay. You?
Blair?
On top of that is another 14% for debt, I believe. We
Yeah,
incur the
yeah.
debt,
This
so
is just without, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because the debt
So-
is not counting. And
if you include that, which our debt is incurred for capital projects, you would see an increase and a lift in that. The work that council has put forward is to reach a 70% in capital, 30% in operations by 2030, if not sooner. The 30% within operations would include our debt repayment as well, of which a good portion of that 30% would go towards, which again, you could argue that that is all capital, but because debt repayment comes out of operations, that's where the 30% will be housed.
Thank you. So at 2025, it's estimated 56% of the PRA allocation will be directed to capital, and a further, so that takes you about 14% below the target of 70% that council set for 10 years.
yes, through your worship, you are correct. And that's why, because the new strategies until is a 10 years, allocation 7, 10, 30. That's the reason I'm projecting until 2020, 30, so we can see the goal reaching of the 7, 10, 30. But for the purpose of this financial play, we always cover 5 years, right? So
Yeah.
that's the reason.
Thank you, Flavia. Any further comments? Any further questions of council? You ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to item 8.2. We have report number 21032 from the city planner regarding the official community plan and zoning amendment bylaws number 4480 and 4481 floodplain updates. Councillor Javetkov?
I'll move recommendation number 1, that report number 21-032 from the city planner OCP and zoning amendment bylaws number 4480 and 4481 floodplain updates be received. Further, that the official community plan amendment 21-01 bylaw number 4480 2021 and zoning amendment 21-01 bylaw number 4481 2021 be given third readings as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Javetkov. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Earl? Any discussion? Any comments, council? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Councillor Javetkov, you want to do number 2?
Move recommendation number 2, the official community plan amendment 21-01 bylaw number 4480 2021 be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Mike's on.
I'll move recommendation number 3, that zoning amendment 21-01 bylaw number 4481 2021 be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kempf? Discussion? Councillor Earl, go ahead.
Sorry, I should have pressed my button, not raised my hand. My apologies. So just for my own clarification, actually, I'll hold off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions, council? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have 8.3. We have report number 21025 from the city planner. Official community plan amendment by 2102 bylaw number 4497 and zoning amendment 2102 bylaw 4498 Chamberlain Park for consideration of first and second readings. Councillor Wilbur?
I'll move that report number 21-025 from the city planner regarding official community plan amendment 21-02 and zoning amendment 21-02, bylaw number 4497 2021 and 4498 2021 be received. Further, that the official community plan amendment 21-02, bylaw number 4497 2021 and zoning amendment 2102, bylaw number 4498 2021 be given first and second readings.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Earl. Discussion? Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. So kudos to staff for chipping away at the beast that is the Chamberlain Park issue. We appreciate your forbearance. For my own clarification, with respect to where we are in the work for addressing this issue, does this mark the end of our long and winding journey, or is there more to come?
Brenda?
Through your worship. Yes, we are nearing the end. These are the final 2 properties that are being purchased from the residents there. I am happy to say that last week we received the final signature on the first subdivision consolidation plan with the 10 properties. So that land sale is very close to the end. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, council? Further questions? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 8.4, we have report number 20016 from the corporate officer regarding a land sale bylaw for Chamberlain Park encroachments for Berger and Jacob, number 4495, 2021, for consideration of first three readings. Councillor Javetkov?
I'll move that report number 20-016 from the corporate officer land sale bylaw Chamberlain Park encroachments, Dr. Berger and Mr. Jacob, number 4495, 2021, be received. Further, that bylaw number 4495, 2021 be given first three readings.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Earl, do you second that?
No, I was going to make the motion, but I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? You ready for the question, Council? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 'That's unbelievable. 9:30 and we're through the business. Great job. So I will move to Mayor's business, and I got a few items I'd like to update Council and City on. First one, we had another meeting with childcare providers last week and continue to work away on understanding the issue of childcare in the city and how it's impacting the economic opportunities for workers and folks that are trying to work and access reliable and accessible and affordable childcare. And so we had one meeting with the childcare providers last fall and did some work on it and been working with the Ministry of Children and got some really good information. Met with Miss Patty from Miss Patty's Childcare and got some further kind of observations of watching and seeing how the childcare functions and operates. So we had a meeting and coordinated it with Northern Health from the hospital, and it's really evident that the need for a broadened level of expanded level of childcare for emergency RNs and nurses and healthcare professionals and other folks working in a field where they have expanded levels of need. So hospital Northern Health representatives were on the call, as well as the delivery of the program through Northern Lights College, and we had the folks that operate that program, the early childhood educator, along with the electoral area directors for the region and a number of the childcare providers. And Miss Patty's team of folks who work in the curriculum of the early childhood educators need to do a project as part of their curriculum. And so one of the projects that we're going to go to work on and they're going to work on is to develop a model for an expanded level of healthcare or childcare for the city, and how and what would be required in terms of resourcing it and facilities and funding and all of that. And I had another meeting last week with the consultants that had developed a process for expanded level of childcare in Trail for the smelter and the workers down there. So we're just continuing to work away on this model and trying to find a way to see how we can build and support the initiative of childcare and expanded level of childcare for the community. And this is about somebody helping us, or us helping somebody develop that model of a private business or service, and how we can enhance it. So it's kind of exciting to me to be able to see it evolve a little bit and get some a little bit of detail, a little more detail to it. And we'll have another meeting in a couple of weeks as they begin to put that proposal together. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that in terms of what we're doing or anything about it? We'll keep you informed on it and keep you updated on the work that we do. Had a meeting with TC Energy, and so they've got some projects coming in the next this summer that are going to have some expanded level of projects that are construction projects, and they've updated us on them and continuing to work on developing these projects. And they've committed to us in this one that it's probably 400 or 500 person project for about 4 or 5 months, and they will be in the community. They won't be in the camp. They'll be supporting the local community through that project. And so that's really good news to me to be able to see that we see that uptick in economic opportunities that are created by the contractors and the employers when they come into the community and stay in the hotels and the rental accommodation and in our restaurants and in the food stores buying their supplies and stuff. And there's a number of projects kind of coming in the next couple of years that I think will see that rebound of some of that economic fortunes. I was asked to present to the Northern Lights College. They have their international student virtual orientation. I presented to the group about 2 weeks ago and give them a little bit of an overview of the community and the city and some of the things that they can experience. And, you know, this international program that they have at the college, you can't help but admire the work that these young students are coming into Canada and coming into our community, and you see them in the service sector, and they have to work when they're here, and that's part of the deal. So we see them in that service sector throughout the community, and it's really filled a huge void that sometimes existed in our community a number of years ago when there was nobody. It was tough to find workers who were willing to go to work in some of that service sector. And I remember I always use this story about a number of years ago. I was coming home from the lake when I was retired, and it was about 6 o'clock, and I phoned Laverne and I said, baby, don't worry about dinner. I'll find something when I get home. It was 6 o'clock, and she said, yeah, well, don't worry. So I stopped at A&W at 6 o'clock, and the sign on the door closed. We've reduced hours because of lack of staff. And that was kind of the thing we went through a number of years ago when you'd go to some of the community's services that were struggling trying to find people to work in it. So I love the college and this international program that's brought these students into our community. They're making Canada, lots of them are looking to make Canada their home. And in fact, the childcare process, there's a number of the students in that ECE program that are exactly that. They're here to make a career of in the community, and I think how good is that? So I really appreciated the opportunity to be invited. We have the meeting this afternoon on supportive housing, and the first committee meeting that they're setting that up. But Kathleen and the Chamber and I have continued to stay in touch with them and the contractors through BC Housing and Horizons North as that project's going along, and we continue to make sure that we help them, assist them in identifying any local business, local service sectors that they may need to identify that will be could help provide the services for that project, and we'll continue to work away on that. Hockey Canada, we had a call a week ago, I think, with the Vice President of Hockey Canada, Dean McIntosh, and it was just really was a very strong in terms of their plans for 2021 are really to get moving forward on Hockey Canada and some of the initiatives and the tournaments and the events that they host. And obviously the plan for 2020 was for us to host the Women's National Under-18 Championships, a 10-team tournament that would have been here for a week, and we had to cancel it, obviously, as a result of the pandemic. So they've talked to us about their full steam ahead to try to get the initiative underway with Hockey Canada to get the tournament plan for 2021. And they brought forward some ideas in terms of some other initiatives that they'd like to have us consider or be a part of in conjunction with that. So it's a broadened maybe opportunity that they're going to offer to us. So Blair and I met with them, and we got the staff from the Event Center working with Hockey Canada to bring that back, to get the proposal together with Hockey Canada and back to council, and we'll get it hopefully moving forward in a very positive way. And I want to update council on an aspect that took place last week at the Peace River Regional District. And so the regional district has traditionally funded different things through economic development or grants and aids to organizations, but we're really doing that. That function was not being handled properly under the bylaw and the requisition, and so they've changed it. And so the proposal was to move to a service function for a couple of initiatives in the region, and so I put forward the events that Hockey Canada and we have with Hockey Canada at the Event Center and with our event sport tourism strategy. And so the proposal will be that we put that forward as an initiative, hopefully through to a request for a referendum at some point in the fall through the region. And we'll put all of that together and hopefully see that move forward in a way that we see that secure funding coming for the events in the future. So it's very, very positive. I participated in a call a week ago with the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate, Jonathan Wilkinson, and the Minister of Energy Mines for BC, Bruce Ralston, on the announcement of the second phase, the second allotment of the 50 million. Federal government gave 1.7 billion to Western Canada for the cleanup of dormant wells in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC got 120 million of that money. And so they allocated the first 50 million last year, and that was designed to clean up the dormant wells, those old wells that have been in existence for 40, 50, 60 years and are no longer active. And so the feds and the province are partnering to put this money together to reclaim them and reclaim the property. And so the money is dedicated, directed to local BC businesses, and they clean up these old wells. So it's a benefit to the landowners who have these things cleaned up. Now that land goes back to agricultural land, back to production, back to food production. Cleans up the environment because now you get rid of that liability that was existing there from years and years and years ago. And it's a huge partnership for us in the community level, both First Nations and our communities, to identify those areas and dormant wells that we would like to see clean up. So they've allocated the second, now 50 million, and it'll be out for release here. And hopefully we see a bunch of our local business and service sector get some of that funding as well. So I was very positive. I was really pleased to be invited to participate in the call with the two ministers and appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. On the weekend, there was a public issue that got brought to the region as a result of a public statement issued on a personal social media account, and it's created some fairly significant stir as a result of what's being considered to be anti-discriminatory, or racism. And so I want to bring it forward because I've been, over the weekend, I dealt with it a fair amount in terms of what the City of Dawson Creek's position is on it. And certainly I think we always need to be in the focus of that to demonstrate that we would never condone any type of racism or anti-discriminatory comments that would be made of any sort on behalf of our community. So I would like to, Councillor Earl, if you...
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. Obviously, it's not a pleasant thing to have to discuss, but it is, I think, worth our attention. At this time, if I can get a seconder, I would move that the City of Dawson Creek draft a statement reaffirming the comments you just made with respect to our commitment to anti-discrimination, anti-racism, and condemning these particular statements.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, second. Any discussion, Council? Councillor Dober?
Just a bit, like not, I'm not to say this the right way. I just, because something happens in the media, I don't understand why we have to say what position we are, because that's the position we've always been. So why, I'm just a little confused why, I get why the regional district did, because that individual sits on the board and there's more, but I just unclear in my head why we would even say anything, because we're not in that position anyways.
Yeah, we're so certainly I've heard it over the weekend from people saying, look, are you guys, the City of Dawson Creek, are you going to be issuing a statement, a public statement, condoning that you don't ever would accept that racism or anti-discriminatory statements would be acceptable in our community? And that's what we're saying.
Okay.
Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I didn't understand the motion there. Jeremy kind of faded out at the end.
So.
I agree. We don't accept racism and discrimination, but I don't know anything about this issue. I've never seen it. I've never heard about it. So I definitely am not in a position to make a decision on this specific one. Just generic racism, discrimination. Yeah, I agree 100%. And we've said that before. I guess we could put it on the agenda twice a year and reiterate it for the benefit of the public. But So I'd just like clarification on the motion.
So we are going to issue a statement that we would, on behalf of the city of Dawson Creek, we would issue a statement that we are not ever going to condone any kind of racism of any kind or anti-discriminatory comments of any kind on behalf of our city and our council.
Okay.
Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, the statement is just reaffirming our position on these topics. It's an unfortunate situation, and, we're neighbors, and we have our MOU with Soto at First Nation, and we have built up great relationships with our First Nation communities, and really it's just a reaffirming that we believe in those relationships. And so for me, I will support the motion.
Thank you. Further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. And Chief Administration Officer's operational update, Blair.
Your worship, at this time, nothing new to report.
Thank you.
Okay.
Diary? Nothing? Consent calendar? Motion to receive consent? Councillor Wilbur, second. Councillor Kemp. Any comments? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And strategic priorities? Blair?
Presently, we're just finalizing the chart, and we'll have it put forward to council. It's the work that you've done and landed on for 2021 and beyond, so we'll have that out.
Thank you, Blair. So, media questions? Committee of the Whole reports, and so I don't know if our staff sergeant is going to be calling in. Brenda?
I'm told that he's about 5 to 10 minutes out,
okay.
so he'll
Well,
report when he arrives.
We'll get him on when he gets here, and so we'll move forward then with the next corporate officer. The mic's on, so that was timely.
That's convenient. In regards to my department, things are continuing on wonderfully with our records management project. We are full speed ahead in this year with implementing our new filing system. So once we get our kinks worked out through the year, we will train all the rest of the departments on our new system. Chamberlain Park encroachments, I did speak briefly about that, so I'm hoping within the next month we might be finished on those reports. Council chambers, we still do not have a timeline as to when the cameras are going to be arriving, so I'll keep you up to date on that one. And we did have our strategic planning session on February 11th, and there were many projects that we want to fit into this year, but we still need to unpack them a bit and see what would be manageable. So I'll be reporting on those in the next Committee of the Whole. But besides that, that's all I have to say, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Brenda. Any questions, Councillor Wilbur?
I just have a question around the kindness meters. If a local organization or company was to do a fundraiser, would they just make their donation directly to the city for the kindness meters?
So if they wanted to donate directly to the kindness meters?
So there is a group that's looking at doing a Fun Friday. So every Friday they donate a toonie so they could wear their jeans and sweatshirts, and they're looking to put a challenge out through the Chamber of Commerce to other businesses. So in doing that, would then each of those participants just make their donation to the city of Dawson Creek?
Yeah, the city can accept those directly.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Rather than plugging the meters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Councillor Parsons?
So a couple of...
Oh, sorry, Councillor, I just, you're good. Go ahead.
Am I good?
Yeah.
You sure?
I thought I cut you off when I shut off Councillor Wilbur.
Well, that's okay.
I'm still getting
Shut
on
me off.
this.
So just go to the grant section of the report. Let's talk first about the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. So we're at stage 2. What does that mean?
I'm not aware of what stage 2 would involve on that. Ross, are you familiar with that, or would that be our grant writer we need to touch base with?
Thank you, through your worship. No, I'm not entirely sure what stage 2 means either, but we can follow up and get that answer for you.
Yeah, no, I apologize to you in a sense. I should have forewarned you. I wanted to ask that question, but I hadn't noticed it until just there, because I was looking at the due date, August the 20. We would know August the 2021. So my question really was also, is there a stage 3, a stage 4? How many stages are there? When will we get a final decision? I'm not expecting an answer because it's not a very fair question to ask you. So I'm just kind of curious. Maybe we can get some information about that. Because I was wondering, what were our hopes for the beginning of that work? I mean, the work is contingent on the grant. So it obviously won't be doable for the 21-22 hearty skating season, I would think.
So thank you, through your worship. I know the one project on the slab is a 2-year project, so we hope to have that information and have the plan, the design done this year. And then the construction would actually take place immediately in the spring of 2022.
Okay. And then related to the NDIT, there was a bit of a, should we call it a hiccup, concerning that. And I haven't had a chance to talk to you, Ross, about that, but that was adjusted. The writing was adjusted this weekend, and it was sent in to NDIT so that it more strongly aligned with the grant parameters by Dale last night.
Thank you. Any further comments for Brenda? Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. And so now we'll move to our next report. I see the staff sergeant is here, so we'll ask Damon to give his update on a report from the staff sergeant. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship.
Welcome.
My councilors. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, have a chair and the floor is yours.
Can you hear me okay then with my mask on? Yeah, I'll try and talk a little louder. So the policing report that I'm providing today is for January 2021. So our first report of the year. For January 2021, we were running 7 soft temporary vacancies. It's a little higher than I like to see. Hopefully it doesn't go any higher, but they're somewhat unavoidable. So we're supporting those members and getting back to frontline operational duties as soon as we can. But right now we're looking at 7. For crime trends for January 2021, and that's January 1st to January 31st, we took a total of 653 calls for service. That's down from last year when we took 681, or a decrease of about 4%. Of those, we saw 79% within the city of Dawson Creek and 21% in the rural surrounding area. When we compare that to last year for the same time period, that works out to a decrease of calls within the city of 2% and a decrease of calls within the rural area of about 10%. Our crime trends that we noticed throughout January are pretty much what we've been seeing for the last 6 months or a year, is property crime continuing to drop. Our crimes against person is going up slightly. So for January, we did see a decrease of 50% in break and enter to residence compared to last year. A decrease of 46% for break and enter to business, again compared to January last year. Decrease of theft of vehicle, 23%. So some pretty big decreases again. We did see, like I said, some increases in persons crimes, an 18% increase in assaults, and a 33% increase in sex assaults. Because we're again dealing with small numbers there, an increase of only 1 sex assault makes that number look a little bit bigger than it is. Drug possession or drug trafficking, we did see quite an increase, 150%. And then impaired driving, we did see a little bit of an increase as well. For our annual policing priorities, we've wrapped up our 2020 policing priorities, and we're working now on establishing our 2021 policing priorities. So you may remember last year, I know Councillor Earl, you were there for our town hall public meeting. That was the first time I've ever done that, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, with COVID this year, I wasn't able to do the same thing. So we are doing an online survey, I think, which is out right now on CJDC. So we're collecting the community's feedback on that right now. I believe that survey ends this week. And then I'll be looking to do a meeting with the interagency committee to get some feedback, as well as yourselves and the Pouce-Coupe Mayor and Council as well. That's all I have for you today, unless there's any questions.
Sorry, thank you, Damon. Questions, Council? So let me just get... So, Councillor Parslow.
I've got several questions. Can you elaborate a bit on the nature of the COVID call-outs that you've had to respond to? What's the general category of activity that has led to you being called?
Generally, we're seeing, we do get calls for face masks in public spaces or indoor spaces. We did get a few calls over Christmas and New Year's of gatherings. So gatherings in homes. I don't think we issued any fines for that. It was education, and everybody we talked to complied. So that pretty much consists of the calls that we're getting for COVID. So.
Okay. Now the second question relates to the resourcing. So maybe you can give us some background here. I haven't gone back and looked at all your reports, but I'm left with the impression that this number of soft vacancies is been fairly consistent, give or take one, for quite an extended period of time. In fact, I would postulate that even before you were here, it was something like this. I mean, I'm not linking your presence to this at all, but you know what I mean? Before, this is seems to be, so I'm curious, is this a normal, like if I combine the off-duty sick or injured and the members on maternity, paternity leave, isn't that total 7? So that's about, what, 25% of the detachment?
Pretty close, yeah.
Is that compared to other detachments, is that normal?
I think it's a little bit higher than where we're seeing. So the difference that you should take away from perhaps when I arrived into now is the hard vacancies versus the soft vacancies. So we used to carry a lot of hard vacancies, which is members that have transferred and the positions haven't filled. We've taken steps to avoid that from now on, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't have hard vacancies anymore. We do have soft vacancies, and the soft vacancies are the ones that are considered the maternity or paternity leaves, or members that are injured or have an illness and can't work right now, but we're supporting them in getting back. You know, what can I say? I mean, I don't have any evidence that our mental health calls, for example, have increased throughout COVID. They've been fairly straight line, and we haven't seen a huge increase in mental health calls. Mm-hmm. However, one would presume, and what we've heard perhaps, is that we are seeing, people being off work and the economy and stuff. It does have driving factors, and what I'll say is that affects police officers too, right? So we're, a lot of our officers are stressed through the COVID times right now, and just as an example, writing face mask tickets or social and gathering tickets, we're being held accountable in social media, and it's very stressful for some of the officers, and we're dealing with some of the mental health effects of COVID right now as well, and that may be contributing to some of our members being off.
So just as...
Yep.
So obviously people, maternity leave and paternity leave are good things. Is there any provision for replacing people who are on maternity leave or paternity leave? In my profession, if somebody went on paternity leave, they were replaced for the duration of the paternity leave. I don't see this happening. What I'm concerned about, you're talking about stress. But what about the stress on those members who are working?
Yeah, and you're
working
right.
at 25% less than your required complements. So it's a multiplying effect, Damon. It's
yeah, you're completely right. The difference in what you're talking about, though, is when someone goes on maternity or paternity or perhaps long-term illness or injury, you're able to draw from a local pool to be able to hire someone in a casual or a term position. Whereas we have to bring people, we have to move a member and their family here permanently. I don't have the option to hire an officer on a casual basis or a term basis. That's a permanent move. So I do risk out some of those vacancies. Right now, we have, like I said, 7 soft vacancies. However, we're also surplus to establishment by 1 position. We're also getting another member on March 1st, which will be surplus to establishment by 2 positions. So kind of what you're saying there is I am risking out the vacancies that we have, and I'm overstaffing us and taking the risk that I'm not going to overstaff the community and overcharge, which I haven't so far, and I think we're good. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be quick. Just wanted to touch on the stats with respect to impaired driving and drug possession, both of which are reasonably dramatic increases. Is that, putting your psychic hat on, is that a result more of an increase incidence of it, or is it just now that you're not spending the same time and effort dealing with vehicle thefts, break and enters, stuff like that, you have the ability, this, which maybe once upon a time would have fallen into that dark figure of crime, is now being recognized?
I think you hit it on the head there. So we are seeing a decrease in property crime, and that's allowing the officers to be out more and being a little bit more proactive, which is resulting in more impaired charges and more drug offenses and more charges. So I do agree with that. And I'll speak to separately just the opiate deaths and overdoses and stuff. So if you had asked me, because you had asked this question last time, so I want to address it and come back to it. If you'd asked me December 31st about the opiate situation in Dawson Creek or overdose deaths in community, 2019 and 2020, I wouldn't say it was anything, it was relatively average, I guess. There was no huge increases or decreases, and it was relatively straight line, and there's no surprises there. But for 2021, in the first 6 weeks, we've had a large number of overdoses and overdose deaths relating to opiate overdose. So 2019, 2020, we were looking at around, and I'll speak to deaths, 4 to 5 deaths as a result of opiate overdose. But this year in 2021, we've already seen 7. So we're only 6 weeks into the year. So we've seen quite a bit more overdose deaths relating to opiate overdose than we have the last 2 years.
That is something to be mindful of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dober?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning. I just had a couple questions. Just looking at the report, I like how it's laid out. It's easy to read, but just in the 3 or 4 months that I've been here, I've seen some consistencies in increases in sexual assault, drugs, mental health, which all to me seem from the pandemic, people not being able to do things, laid off, that are adding a lot of stress to people's life. Is there groups and stuff that the RCMP work with to be proactive to help try and prevent some of this as it grows? Because it's with not seeing much light at the end of the tunnel in this pandemic, those numbers could grow, and it's just concerning to me to see the mental health issues and all that in our community.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we do have members on different committees throughout town. So for example, I do have a member on the mental health committee in town. So she's kind of our foot in the door and our voice at the table for that committee, for the mental health group. We have another member that's part of the resource committee or the network ministries. He liaises with that group of people in town, and then obviously I'm a part of the interagency committee as well, where we can discuss this kind of stuff and work together to come up with solutions to address it. Some of the increases, like for example, like I said, sex assault increase of 33%. You have to keep in mind that last year we had 3, this year we had 4.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about such small numbers, the increases do seem huge, but we're talking about 1 more. And that's not to say that's okay, because I'm not belittling that at all. That's very serious. And I think what we need to take from this is that 2020 our policing priorities really focused on property crime strongly and heavily. This year, we really need to take a look a little bit more at persons crimes and include a little bit more initiatives to deal with the assaults and the sex assaults.
Okay, thank you. And are those groups that you work with, are they pretty receptive to this, and are they, focused on helping to make it better?
Absolutely, for
Okay,
sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. Thank you, Damon, for your report. I always appreciate seeing your stats and numbers, and it gives us a good picture of where the community's at. So I appreciate that. My question is just around your online survey. Did you say it's accessible through CJDC?
It is. I actually put it on our Twitter account earlier this week or last week as well. So it's on our Twitter if you want to go on there. So
I would just like to share it out to the community.
yeah,
so
absolutely,
thank you.
for sure. So
Thank you very much.
Add us on Twitter. So
Okay.
yeah.
Councillor Earl?
Just one quick follow-up. I wanted to touch on the incidence of mental health calls. I know when you first started here, that mental health calls were a big, I guess, they monopolized a great deal of your staff time, and through a great deal of work, you were able to identify kind of why it was being throttled in the way it was. Is this increase reflective of maybe some of that coming back, or is it purely people are there are more mental health issues, or the time constraints involved in dealing with these calls is?
When I did arrive, we were looking at a huge increase in mental health calls. Like you said, I think it was around 200%. If I recall correctly, we had a 200% increase in mental health calls when I arrived compared to the year before. So that was part of getting a member into the mental health community and joining that committee to start getting a foot in the door and having some input into mental health strategies in the community, pardon me. So that being part of that committee and being part of community groups now that deal with mental health led us to establishing some partnerships as well with the ICMT as well. So you're familiar with ICMT in town here?
Yeah.
I think it's called Intensive Case Management Unit, but don't quote me on it. But ICMT, or ICMU I guess it would be, has been very helpful in taking the load off of us for mental health calls. So they're meeting us at the hospital right away. So I wouldn't say that our mental health calls have decreased. However, our time commitment to those calls has decreased because ICMT is becoming engaged right away. So we're not sitting at the hospital waiting for 4 hours now for a doctor assessment.
Okay.
Whereas we are taking people, and again, these aren't criminals, these are patients. We're taking patients to the hospital, and the ICMT is taking over to ensure that person gets before a doctor, releasing us and getting us back to the road.
Cool.
So the increase that you're talking about over the last month, I mean, if it was over 6 months, maybe that's something that we need to look at, but with an increase just for 1 month, maybe that's an anomaly. Mental health calls always go up around Christmas season and winter, like late winter. Perhaps people get stir crazy at home, and that generates some mental health issues. Mm-hmm. But I think that we would watch it for the next couple months and see where it goes or what happens. So
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Damon. I appreciate you coming in this morning. It's good to see you. And one question for me, Warren Brown's retirement as the chief superintendent, has there been any indication of a replacement at all?
yeah, so Chief Superintendent Warren Brown retired on February 1st, and his acting replacement right now is Superintendent James McLaren in Prince George.
Thank you.
I can send you his contact information.
That'd be great.
I'll
Thank
do
you.
that, yeah.
Thanks, Damon.
Very good, thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a great week. Next item is 15.3. We'll have a report from the Chief Financial Officer. Good morning.
Good morning. So I don't have a lot of to add on this report other than starting today, the auditors are coming to the second phase of the year-end audit. They started 2 weeks ago specifically with tangible capital assets, and now with the whole remaining portion of the year-end. We finalized the T5s that we are required to send to all the residents that did specific transactions with tax sales or anyone that received interest above $50 through the years. We are finalizing the T4. We really are now just pending to receive the BC pension letter that we need to attach to the T4. But the rest is is completed. As I stated on this report, was a little more complex this year as a requirement of the breakdown of any salaries through the time of period that CRA was granting some of the benefits. And this is one of the reasons CRA asked us, how the employers to do this breakdown so that they can do a kind of an audit and trace out those that applied for those benefits and if they were entitled based on the settings, the requirement that they had during the time. I also included here the paperless goal. So since November, when we start to charge the $2, we did see an increase from the 5,252 bills that we issue. We had originally only 608 that are asking to receive it through emails. And since so, they increased it to 1,013. And we are already seeing again, just 2 weeks ago, another 145. So that's very courageous, and it's a great incentive because it does reduce the cost that we have for issuing out the bills through the paper and mailing, and so that's really good. And at the same time, we use this opportunity to communicate to the residents about the opportunity to do the prepayments, the pre-authorized payments, and we also are seeing an increase of that. So, and that's it. If we have any question, I'm available to answer.
Thank you, Flavia. Any questions from council? Flavia, two for me. One, we had last year when, with the first year of the pandemic, we gave the tax relief penalty for business and residents, and we put a 2% penalty in place for August, September, October, November, December. And because the province implemented the 6% at 1st of October, is there any way we can have some discussion about implementing a similar program this year in terms of what does it look like, what would it impact us in cash flow, can all of those considerations? Because I still think it's worth our while in terms of still seeing the businesses recovering a bit and anything we can do to help buffer that for folks. And so that would be one to me. I would like to see if we would be able to have some information on that.
Yeah, sorry. Through your worship, yes. My goal is actually on the next council meeting, you present some options and potential impacts, depending on how much percent people would be paying, something similar to what I did last year. So we'll be able to visualize it about splitting the penalty within 5 periods.
Good. It's frustrating to me that the federal government is issuing now, requiring us to issue T5 for the interest that people pay on, or is that us that we missed?
We miss it.
Okay. So, so then I'll ask this question. I want to express my frustration to the federal government. Is there a way for us to say, if you prepay, instead of paying you interest, that we are going to apply what would normally be paid as interest as a reduction to the amount of your tax bill owing? So we take the equivalent of whether not paying it as interest, but reducing the tax obligation so that it removes the necessity to issue a T5 for the interest. Because my worry is that I think if people get billed receive a T5 for the interest, well, they're going to remove, that's going to remove the incentive to pay in advance a bit, because now they're going to get charged, they're going to have to declare that interest as income. And so that reduces the benefit that they receive for prepaying. Is that an assumption on my part that's incorrect?
Through your worship, it all depends. Like if the intention of we are paying the interest is so the rate that we offer is better than what's in the market. But if they would not be investing here, theoretically it's kind of an instead of investment, they would be put in a bank and they will receive a T5. So whatever they would be invest, they would be receiving the T5. Like I said, we miss it because this requirement of send anything that when you paid interest above $50 a year, we are required, we are mandated to issue this T5. So I think it's a question of the investor or the resident, they would be putting the money in one of the extreme, or here or in the bank. Anyway, you would get a T5.
Yeah.
Right?
The learnings to me on the final one for me, the learnings on the water billing for saying to people, we're going to charge you $2 now more for your water bill because that's what it costs us, and probably 30 grand for postage and envelopes and stationery. To me, the message is we're giving those who sign up for a electronic billing, we're giving you a reduction of $2. And to me, then that's we're not charging people more. We're charging people for what it costs us to produce that and run that utility. And anybody who signs up for electronic billing saves us that funding. Now is going to be save the $2 increase, right? That's just a comment. Councillor Parslow?
The very end of your report, I don't have it up here in front of me right now, you have a statement there about the number of rural residents receiving utility services. Is that the raw water group, or is that another group? Where are these the people between the pump out station and Dawson Creek?
Yeah, that's through your worship. That's what the users of the water save stations, like for the ones that not the raw water, the regular water served through the water stations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any idea how many accounts there are for people, or is it just they pay cash to buy a fob and we have no idea how many customers that we would be servicing through the rural services? Who would access rural customers accessing our water stations?
Yeah. Through your worship, yes, we would be able to understand what's the number because it's based on those that have the fob. So based on FOB users, we have the list.
Yeah, and then but then you got the ones that are buying from the water delivery guys. We wouldn't have any idea how many of them there are, right?
Those we would not, because they are provided by the others. Yeah.
Thank you, Flavia.
You're welcome.
Councillor Parslow?
Well, it'd be an interesting statistic,
Yes.
for sure. It's good to have that sort of information for future uses.
Yes.
I wonder if the water carriers would give us their data.
Yeah.
We know volumes, right? We know volumes.
able
We
to
just
know
don't know how many customers that are impacted by it. Thank you, Flavia. Any further questions from council? Thank you, Flavia. Next up, we have the General Manager of Development Services. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here. The wind blew me to work today. It was quite a weather change we had, and I was just checking with Devin. We didn't seem to have any issues other than drifting. I know Saturday morning there was a number of areas that had some pretty good drifts that we had to deal with throughout the day. He mentioned that up at our Loran Reservoir, the drifts were higher than the roof of the pickup. So. But by Sunday, it warmed up so much the snow really wasn't blowing around anymore. It's just melting. So, but thankfully, I haven't heard about any trees. I don't know if Ross has heard anything, of anything coming down. So that's good because it was really strong yesterday. I know my one thought there was I was really happy the Christmas tree was not still up downtown because it may not have been for long. So. Couple things. We're moving forward on our sewer trunk inspection and cleaning. The inspection, we anticipate Aquacoustic will be here the week of March 8th. And it'll be about a week, maybe a little bit more of work to do the inspection of the sewer trunk main. So looking forward to that, and that will help us get the information we need to put into a tender so we can get that moving as well for later in the year. 102nd Avenue Crossing. Grant is submitted. We're just waiting to hear on the outcomes of that. I'm hoping it's March or April, but we know how sometimes these grants go. They do have obviously a tight timeline on completion, so I hope they understand that they'll get the approvals out soon, one way or another, get some answers. Engineering side, we're busy finalizing designs for our roads and sewer projects that are planned for 2021. We plan to have tenders out in March, which is on time, on schedule for what we were anticipating. So obviously with today and budgets and everything being completed as early, that's very helpful. And as we move forward, we're going to be aspiring to get tenders completed even earlier in the year. So. One of the other things, you did mention water sales there, so I apologize as there was some stats that were supposed to be attached. I did send that to council here this morning. Just as a point of interest on water sales for the month of January, so residential sales was 6,800 cubes. So that would be individuals pulling up, filling their own tanks, hauling their own water. Commercial was 11,500 approximately cubes. So again, that would be everything from the commercial guys hauling water to a residence to the commercial guys hauling drinking water to maybe some sort of a facility or a rig or something for drinking, not for non-potable. And non-potable sales was 1,500, 1,600 cubes. Private industry was 3,700 cubes. So. Our daily average for the treatment plant through the month of June was 5,500 cubes. And that's pretty typical for this time of year. And just for comparison, the village of Puskupi for the whole month uses just under 5,000 cubes. So that's a very typical relationship, if you're ever curious, is that the village of Pus typically use in a month about what our community uses in a day. A couple other things I wanted to touch on was we had a water leak last week, bit of an interesting one. We started losing significant amount of water about lunchtime. I think that was on Wednesday. And usually we wait about 5 minutes and the phone starts ringing and we have someone telling us water's running down a road or it's showing up somewhere. And that didn't happen. And we waited another half an hour, an hour, 2 hours, and we never got any calls. We had people scouring through the community to find this leak because it was significant enough that we were challenged to supply enough water to town to fill the Park Hill Reservoir. So we were losing out of Park Hill faster than we could put water in it. So that is a concern, obviously. We had all our staff out looking and we determined, obviously, the water was going somewhere. It wasn't surfacing on a road. It must be going into a ditch, must be going into a drain, or possibly the creek. And lo and behold, we found the leak at the 10th Street Bridge, and it was bubbling up into the creek. So there is a water line that crosses the creek there. And very fortunate that we have valves on either side of the creek. We were able to isolate it. Nobody was out of water. So we've done that, and we're now looking forward about how we're going to repair that. And there's a couple of options. We could possibly just go in and do a repair. That's going to require us to work within the creek that has its own set of challenges. Or we possibly look at maybe just installing a new line under the creek, which then we wouldn't have to be working within the creek itself. We could directional drill. Or we'll look at the option of whether we can abandon that section of line. That's not my preferred option, and I don't think that's ultimately where we'll land, but we're looking at all those options, and we'll figure that out in the coming weeks. One other quick thing was downtown snow removal, and I know there's been some questions throughout this year because it has been a bit of an abnormal year, and we've done things a little bit differently. You'll notice at times we did plow snow to the middle and leave it. And the reason we did that at that particular time was there really wasn't a lot of snow, but there was enough that we felt we needed to clean it up, and we had seen the forecast coming. It was going to get quite warm, +6, +7 at that point in time. So rather than hiring a bunch of equipment for a relatively small removal, we piled it to the middle and left it and dealt with it with our own crews, with our own time. And when we're able to do that, It saves the city, an immense amount of money. But I will preface that by saying that we can't do that all the time. Every situation is unique, and we have to look at it, what time of year it is, what the weather forecast is, how much snow we get, and we make those. So it may not be clear to the public always, because it might be different each occasion, but we are looking at all those scenarios. So the last one we did go down and we did remove it and haul it away because it was too much to leave and weather. So anyways, if there's any questions around that, I just thought I'd let everybody know what our thinking was. Other than that, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Kevin. Council? Councillor Parslow?
I'd like to talk about dangerous trees. Is that your department or Ross's? Okay, I'll talk to you about that, Ross. Abandoned houses. Is that your department?
Sure.
Okay. I keep driving by this property that's obviously abandoned. There's no windows in it. And I always get concerned about the use that place might get put to as a temporary shelter, a place for people to gather, and fire risk. I don't want to mention the location now, but I'll tell you. But what options does a city have to make the place secure for the community as a whole?
So through your worship, the community charter allows us a few options, and it's usually around safety and nuisances. So if it is what would be deemed to be a hazard in some form, we have an ability to notify the owner or go in and secure the property if it's an immediate danger. And then through the remedial action process, give that property owner an opportunity to either remove the nuisance or hazard or bring it up to a standard that it's no longer a safety issue. So we've got some options there. So maybe if you give me that, I can certainly look into that property and see if it's something that we would do.
Yes, thank you. Just my mind goes to viewing not local news, but BC News, and you see house fires and property damage, and it's often linked to a building that's abandoned, do you know what I mean? And so that's where I'm coming from, but I'll mention that to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions for Kevin? Thank you, Kevin. And just on the point on the water leak, and I got a few comments from some folks out, and it was kind of interesting to me, and that's why I was tagging about how many accounts. So one of the questions or comments from a rural resident was, because we had shut the water fill stations down, and do we need to start rationing water now? And so one of the expectations, I believe, one of the issues for not only our residents in the city, but our rural residents is, hold it, if we're out of water, it's a big deal, and we appreciate that. But when we're out of water in a situation like that, our first priority has to be for the public safety of ensuring that those reservoirs are full, to ensure we have adequate fire protection for the city, first of all. And so I'm not sure that there might not be a need to do a bit of a communication messaging to all of the folks who are not only our rural residents but the city residents. Listen, when we have a water break or we have a major issue, we go about repairing it in as quickly as possible. But there's also an issue here of why and what we do with our water.
Yeah, and through your worship, I should have mentioned that when I was speaking of it, is that we don't turn off water sales every time we have a water leak. But in this particular case, because it was significant and we were losing water relatively quickly out of the reservoir, we needed to do what we could to manage that. And so we not only turned off the water sales for the rural folks, but we also shut off private industry. And if had that continued for much longer, we would have started talking about what else we would have had to do within the community to restrict it if it would have been something we couldn't have isolated.
So like I said, I think I'll maybe to have some discussion with administration about maybe a messaging that would be worthwhile for us to go out, so people understand what it is and when we do have a water break and what we do and how we do it and why we have to do it sometimes.
For sure.
Thanks, Kevin. So we're at 10:30, and I would suggest that if we could take a 7-minute recess now, and we'll reconvene in 7 or 8 minutes. And Ross, that'll give Ross some additional preparation time. Go do some tree stuff. We'll move to a report from our General Manager of Development Services. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, Manager of Community Services. We had that other fella already.
Good morning, Your Worship, members of council, and
Morning,
thank
Ross.
you for the opportunity to spend some time expanding my report. I can spend a few more minutes now elaborating. As you are aware, safety is one of those overarching goals for the city of Dawson Creek. Right now, probably the most highest priority right now is to achieve WorkSafe BC certificate of recognition. To that point, we've worked with some consultants over the last couple of years to ensure that we are ready for the audit. In talking with our safety coordinator, it appears that we should be ready to move that work forward in November of this year. I did have a further conversation with, again, with the coordinator to suggest that the BC Municipal Safety Authority is going to watch our audit closely. I don't know that we are the only one. I think there have been other communities that have had core certification, but they're eagerly anticipating our audit in hopes that that will be a bit of a catalyst for other communities in the province. The core certification, obviously it helps us increase our safe and maintaining a safe and healthy workplace. It also will likely provide some financial savings in terms of our safety ratings at the end of the day with that certification. So we'll see a drop in our premiums, or we anticipate we'll see a drop in our premiums. COVID-19 is certainly something that our safety coordinator pays close attention to, and we evolve on a regular basis. Just recently, we updated a couple of our new safe work procedures, including a procedure in the event that we have received a confirmed contact case. And I know I talk with my colleagues here that, you know, what if a friend or a colleague or somebody tests positive, how do we react to that? How do we manage that? So we've got a new procedure in place in that event, as well as a positive test case. So if you've been tested positive, what do you do? Who do you talk to? What's our next step? So we continue to evolve those processes. In terms of general priorities at the moment, the ice is now out of the Kin Arena. Summer maintenance has begun in that building. And actually, our summer recall notices have gone out, so we're already anticipating the work in our parks and playgrounds for the summer. Staff are working closely with the ice user groups to best manage the allocations in the Memorial Arena. And that includes potential spring ice. And my understanding is that we do have a few groups that are interested in extending that spring ice season. So working with those groups, and I guess the 2021 capital projects, we started to kick off a few of those. We lost some ground in 2020, so those projects were going to be somewhat overwhelmed this year. So we've started to kick out some RFPs, RFQs, and working on those. So, Your Worship, I think I will leave it at that for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Sorry, thank you, Ross. Any questions for Ross? Go ahead, Councillor Dober.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had one, Blair might be able to touch on this too. I just had a call last week from a resident about the capital improvements on the tennis courts, and they wanted some input around it or to help out, and said that they would potentially look at financially helping with the project a little bit too if it made it a little bit, you know, more friendly or whatever they were trying to do. I was just wondering if Blair or us knew much about that, and if that process has already started to get quotes on getting the tennis courts done.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Dober. After your call, we did reach out to the individual. We've had discussions with them already. They will be engaged as we work through the redevelopment of the tennis court to include some other opportunities within that facility. So that's well underway.
Okay.
So, anything further, Ross?
No, through your worship, thank you. That is correct. I've reached out to our managers to ensure that that individual is part of that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, the focus on our WorkSafe and safety program that Yinka's leads on behalf of the city. And, you know, you see how if you don't pay attention to it, how significant it can be to our organization. And first of all, everybody, all of our workers, all of our employees, everybody needs to go home safely at the end of the day. That is a first expectation, I think, for all of us. And certainly I really appreciate the diligence and the work that through that safety program that's put to the city, and now even showing the financial benefits to us by reducing our premiums to WorkSafe and et cetera, et cetera. It's just a real benefit. So kudos and compliments to Yinka and staff and you guys for the work you've done there.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Blair?
Your Worship, just echoing what you said, I wanted the opportunity to, first of all, say thank you to Yinka, to Ross, to you and your staff. Yinka, to you and the work that you've done on behalf of the city. Safety is everybody's primary focus. I think everybody agrees that when you go to work, you want to go home at the end of the day. Nobody envisions that not happening. But I want to speak to the COVID protocols we have in place at the city. I want to say thank you, not just to Yinka, but to all of the staff. These are extenuating times we find ourselves in, not just at City Hall, but around the world, really, and in our community. Not always the easiest. I think a huge thank you is what I would like to say to the staff for their commitment to making it work. It is not the easiest thing. There are things that we go through in our day-to-day lives, such as wearing these masks that I'm sure not everybody is jumping up and down with joy about, but the day will come when I think that'll be over. But I do want to recognize our staff, right from yourselves, Mayor and Council, right down to through all of our staff and Yinka being led, through this. What we've done at the city, I think, has been very encouraging. We have got a good protocol in place, and so far, knock on wood, it has worked well for the city of Dawson Creek and the community as a whole, and certainly the city and the workers here. So, thank you.
Thanks, Blair. Councillor Parslow?
The certificate of recognition, would that result in a further reduction in our premium for WorkSafe?
Ross?
Through your worship, yes, Councillor, that is correct.
And so presumably we would be at the lowest rate if we got that?
Through your worship, I'm not entirely sure we would be at the lowest rate, but we've been doing some good work in terms of reducing on an annual basis, and this would certainly add to that.
Okay. And just one comment. Blair and Ross are both working on this, but there was a lesson, I think, that was revealed thanks to Blair's comments to me that I want to share with Council. It's concerning the murals, and there was a contract involving the city, tourism, Dawson Creek, the art gallery or the South Peace Society, and we have these downtown murals. I had a person contact me, talk to me about the dreadful condition of one of the murals, and I think it's fair to say, building on a comment that was shared with you just now about maybe not only that, but they do need to, they're fading and they need to be maintained. But nowhere in this contract was any reference to the care of, the maintenance of. And so we now have an emerging problem, right? We do something, which is great. I'm not disagreeing with what was done, but we got to pay attention to how do we manage the maintenance and therefore the cost of of maintaining those murals. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ, I had one quick item that popped up, and was a news story that was up, and I think it was in Fort St. John, or dealing with a black fungus on trees, on poplars. And I don't know if that's been an issue here or not. It's a black fungus disease that affects trees, and so I know I saw a news story that it was on the city of Fort St. John. We're dealing with it, and I just wonder if we've had any. Have you heard anything about that at all in the city?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe last summer we actually may have had at least one report suggesting it may have been black knot, I think is the disease. I think we had our gardener follow up at the time, and I'm not sure it was actually diagnosed as that. In terms of an annual program, we have not put anything forward in terms of an annual inspection of that nature.
Yeah. Just would maybe be worthwhile, as something we just, if you don't want it to become a major issue, if it isn't already, and so if we could just make a note of that and see if our staff can find out if there is any concern or issue for us to think about. Thank you, Ross. Any further comments for Ross? Thank you. And so our next report, 15.6, we have our fire chief this morning. Good morning, Chief. Good morning. Welcome. Floor is yours.
Okay.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. So good morning. I heard a rumor that brief is a good thing, so I'll try to adhere to that. I'll try to touch on a few key points and events happening at the fire hall and try to keep it fairly brief for you. So first of all, I will start out by talking about the year-end statistics for calls of service for the Dawson Creek Fire Department. We finished off 2020 with 650 calls for service, which was a record number for a single year for the department. I think some of the factors for the higher numbers could be possibly the fact that people stayed home more at times due to COVID-19, and we did have more public service calls, but in general it was a busy year. Area traffic in and around the city, the addition of buildings getting older. It seems like we're getting more and more extreme weather. So I think all of these points could be contributing factors to the increased call volume. Staff changes and new personnel. Myself and Todd Pickett are the two new chief officers in the department. I won't talk about myself, but I will talk about the others. Captain Todd Pickett started his new position as Deputy Chief on January 4th. He's been with the department as a firefighter and most recently as a captain for 15 years. And I personally am really excited to have Todd on board as the new Deputy Chief. I'm very confident Deputy Pickett will do great in his new role, bringing a strong work ethic and a positive attitude with him. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Deputy Chief Burrows for his time here this past year, helping out with the transition process, and I wish him well in his retirement or other future endeavors that he will pursue. With Deputy Pickett's and my promotions, as well as the departure of a firefighter to another department down south in Vancouver, we have had to hire 3 firefighters, and that process is now complete. Firefighter Ross Evans started his career with us in September, firefighter Brandon Lazenchuk started in October, and firefighter Brandon Lowe's came on board in early January. All 3 are great young men, and we're thrilled to have them with us. Replacing 3 firefighters in suppression is a 19% changeover for our department, but we're confident in the hiring process and in the leadership of our group, that we feel this will be a positive and successful transition. We definitely just got a lot younger, which is a good thing, I guess. COVID implications. Basically, COVID-19 has affected our department like it has affected everyone else in the world. Like everywhere else, certain operations and protocols had to change a bit. So because of COVID-19, the inspection numbers from our prevention branch and from our 4 crews were down for 2020 due to having to shut down inspections for 3 to 4 months during the year. The department did manage to conduct and complete 781 inspections for the year. Training numbers were also down due to the pandemic. Firefighters did end up completing 1,788 hours of training for the year. In November, our department did conduct a full-day live fire Mayday protocol training session for all firefighters, and that took place out at the training grounds. I also want to touch on the department's new overtime protocols. So as a department, we are continuing to implement council's overtime strategies that were set forth during the first quarter of 2020. These strategies were developed with the firefighter local, and it will continue to be administered for 2021 and the years ahead. I don't foresee firefighters relocating or retiring this year, which will enable us to have our complete staff for the full year, unlike 2020. So 2021 should be a truer assessment to how this process should work. I want to give a shout out to the Dawson Creek Firefighters Charitable Society. In November, the Firefighters Charitable Society donated $5,000 to the 18 Wheels of Christmas, Network Ministries, and Movember for men's health. They generate their funds throughout the year from their annual poker event and by helping out with other events as well, and then distribute throughout the year to charitable groups and to citizens and families of this community that are in need. The firefighters in Dawson Creek do charity work on their personal time off, and they're very happy and committed in continuing these efforts. Anyways, I feel they do a great job in that respect, and I'm proud of what they're doing. Last thing I want to bring up is January was Firefighter Cancer Awareness Month. Research shows that firefighters are more likely to be diagnosed with cancer than the general public. Members of the BC professional firefighters are being exposed to dangerous carcinogens, smoke, and hazardous conditions daily, and as a result are being diagnosed with many types of cancers due to on-the-job exposures. The health and well-being of firefighters is our top priority, and our firefighters will continue to be provided with the necessary tools and guidance to develop life-saving procedures for cancer prevention. The good news is times have changed and are continuing to change. When I first started my career, it seemed whoever had the dirtiest gear was the coolest, bravest firefighter around. That thought process now has all but vanished. Now having the turnout gear properly cleaned and continuing to have our decon protocols in place after a fire situation or toxic event is a priority. So through education, times have definitely changed, and we as a department here in Dawson Creek are taking a proactive, progressive approach in this ongoing issue. That's all I got.
Thank you, Chief. Questions? Councillor Parslow. Sorry, Councillor Parslow.
Thank you. Well, good to have you on board, Marcel.
Thank you.
Delighted about you being fire chief.
Thanks.
You answered one of my questions already, so I'm not going to reiterate that. I wanted to ask you a question about the training centre and then one about the volunteer firefighters. I wouldn't mind seeing, I think it'd be good information for all of staff, you know, I mean, we have this training centre, which was an initiative that was, I think, well received by the firefighters, and certainly the notion was that we would be able to have other firefighting departments use that facility. And I'm just interested in getting sort of a picture of sometime down the road of how other departments are using it, what's the revenue stream and the cost stream for that facility. So this is just a personal thing, but I'm just interested because we need to continue to promote the use of that facility, and it would be interesting to see how it's growing. So I'm not asking for any answers now. I'm just putting out a pitch that my colleagues may consider or staff might consider.
Before you go to the next one, I'll just give you a brief little.
Yeah.
So I can get something to you on that. But so basically, it has been being used by other volunteer departments. So they have to go through us. For instance, Charlie Lake last year set up Live Fire and Live Fire 1 and 2 to get their firefighters certified, and that goes through us. So we have to line up. Usually it's on weekends, of course, with some of the volunteer departments enabled that can use it. So we kind of line up some of our certified instructors on weekends to run them through it. So it has been being used a little bit. Mackenzie has contacted us. Now, they're not in our regional district, of course, so they get charged different fees than the departments in our regional district would. For instance, renting of the trucks, renting of the facilities. Because they're not in our area, they would be charged differently. And they're in the process, they want to use it for 3 weekends coming up in May type thing. So the good thing with it for us is it enables us not to have to send our firefighters away to get our certification, which is great because we can do any of that kind of training here, which will save the city ultimately money in that respect. And as far as the regional district, some departments in the region do use it more than others, but yeah, I don't want to say it's really a money-making thing, you know what I mean? It's not, but it's not like a loss either, but it's basically something set up so that all the departments can upgrade their skills in the area and use it. So to answer your question a bit, it is being used. There are departments using it a little bit besides us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be a feature of your reports, you know.
Yep.
Just a little. The other, you know, volunteer firefighters provide a very important supplementary role in this community and other communities. What are your aspirations for the volunteer fire department, i.e. from the point of view of the complement, their ongoing training, and they provide a pool of possible professional firefighters for future recruitment. So we'd like to talk a bit about that. So
it has kind of been difficult in the past for the fact that they all have different jobs, right? So basically we practice with the volunteers once a week. We would like to try to have 10 to 12 volunteer firefighters with us. Whenever we have large fires, we use them. They get paged out to come help. But the problem is, like, there's so many times where we have practice nights and there might only be 2 or 3 that show up because they all have lives, they all have other jobs. A lot of them are working out in the oil patch, and it's tough to get a steady group of, I know there's some departments, even talking to Fort St. John, they can hardly get 1 or 2, and so it's something that we're looking at. Unfortunately, we had to kind of stop having the practices due to COVID. So that's been shut down for a few months. So now actually just talking with the new Deputy Chief Pickett, who's in charge of training, he's in the process now of contacting all the volunteers that we have on our staff to see if they're still, who's all interested still, and then we will start up a new complement of trying to get our numbers up again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Anything further? So, thanks. It's good to have you here, and obviously, and to me, pleased about the new structure, and we got some new guys in the detachment, so we look forward to it, and thanks for being here. Our next presenter this morning, we have a report from our airport manager.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Rowan.
Wonderful weather we're having, much better than last week where it was freezing, but all right, so I guess I'll thank you for having me again. I'm glad to see everybody. So I'll just touch down on a few things from my report, and feel free to jump in if you have any questions. But one of the biggest things is that Sealand has continued to operate, which has been a fantastic thing for our airport. It's keeping our aircraft movements high. You know, people are still continuing to get their student's license, so there's still a big interest in our community for aviation, which is fantastic. It's something we love to see at the airport. And unfortunately, I don't really have much of an update for the aeronautical study for NAV Canada. I believe they're at the point where they're presenting their report to Transport Canada for approval. Once that's complete, then they'll be able to circle back to us and actually give us some more information on what kind of a reduction is what they're potentially looking at. And unfortunately, at this point in time, we don't know exactly what exactly that'll look like when it's implemented at the airport quite yet. So it'll probably be another couple of months before we have a significant update to what the future of NAV Canada's operation at Dawson Creek will look like. And on a side note, there's been some fantastic changes with the ACAP program. So airports have been asking for an increase in funding for years, and for the next couple of years, we're seeing a massive increase to the funding available through that program. So for us, that means that we'll be putting in an application for a replacement snowblower. That would be considered a priority 2 project. Since not related to infrastructure, it would be priority 1. So as that program develops, we'll see a lot of airports maybe getting rehabilitated. So those would be given higher priority just because it's much more important to safety. But a snow blower we have a fairly good chance of that being approved. And I believe that we're applying for next year. Just with the funding increase, and they want to maintain that the program is fair across Canada. If you don't meet certain life cycle requirements, they won't consider the project. So unfortunately, this year our snowblower is 19 years old, which is just 1 year shy of the 20-year life cycle that they like to see. So we'll be putting in an application next year for a replacement snowblower. It'll be right in the right spot for the 20-year age, and then we can proceed with a public tender process if it's approved. And unfortunately at the airport, we've had some staffing changes. So we're slightly short-handed right now, but I have to give major kudos to the Public Works Department. They've been fantastic in helping us in this time. And we've had a couple folks from Public Works come over to the airport for a little bit of training and just so they can help us fill out that roster for us, which has been a fantastic thing. All right, and if anybody has any follow-up questions?
Questions, Council? Councillor Parslow?
The NAV Canada Aeronautical Study update. That is a little bit concerning. I must admit, I didn't know that there was a review of it, and it's probably entirely my fault, but it doesn't matter. So, has the city been involved in expressing an opinion about this?
Oh.
This is a question to staff. Sorry, to Blair.
Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Parslow. Early on, the Mayor and myself were on a call with NAV Canada. I know Rowan has been working on this as well. We have been engaged. This has the potential to have an impact on many airports throughout the country. I believe that, until we know what this report says, we won't fully know the impact on Dawson Creek. I believe we will be able to mitigate any of that impact, though, through the work that Rowan has done on behalf of the city. So.
Okay, thanks.
And we have been part of NCLGA and other airports and other communities writing letters of concern through to the federal government.
And if I can add on
Go
that,
ahead.
tack on to that through your worship, we did have a meeting directly with NAV Canada on November 10th. So, and that was an opportunity for all users at our airport to voice their concerns. So in that meeting, we did have a lot of support from our medevacs and just our private operators. So everybody has a chance to directly speak to NAV Canada and voice their concerns. And we did voice our concerns, but it's just like us and NAV Canada are both overseen by Transport Canada, so any movement they want to do, that's why they're making the reports, is they need to present something to Transport Canada and say this is how we're going to mitigate some of the safety impacts by reducing our service. And it's once it goes to them for approval, then they can finally start approaching each of the airports and actually letting them know this is what your reduction might potentially look like, which they can't really they can't jump the gun and kind of give us that information beforehand, before Transport Canada finally gives their approval.
The aspect of us being now a year without any commercial flights, I think it's about a year, February or March, that CMA withdrew service. Is that going to impact our ability for grants without having commercial service?
Yeah, so that was another thing that they really touched on when they announced that ACAP was getting additional funding, is that they recognized that a lot of airports that previously were completely eligible for the program, one of the requirements is having year-round scheduled service. They recognize that the pandemic is a very unique situation, and a lot of airports that were previously eligible for this funding are now not. So in the next couple of years, I think they've waived that requirement, but that will probably be a temporary measure. And I imagine a couple of years, if this continues, we hope not, but if it does continue, I think they're going to finally say, okay, only for airports that actually still have. But they've been very straightforward with all the airports, and they've just let us know that for the next couple of years or the next year or so, they're waiving that one requirement, but we don't know when they'll bring it back to the table.
We spoke to WestJet a month or two ago, I did, and certainly they're still fully intended. It's just the state of the industry today is such that there's no launch site for us in that daily flight to Calgary yet. So thank you, Rowan. Any further questions, Council? Thank you, Rowan. Thank you for coming in. So that concludes our committee of the whole, and at this point now, we will recess to our closed, and I need a resolution to move to closed for sections, agenda item 3.1.3.4.1 or section 90 minutes. Agenda item 6.1 or offer to purchase under section 91, acquisition or disposition of land. Agenda item 6.2 is a proposed memorandum of understanding, and so that's negotiations related to discussions. Agenda item 7.1 is section 91K, negotiations related to discussions of a proposed provision of service. Agenda item 7.2 is appraisals for purchase of land under section 91E. And agenda item 7.3 is a lease proposal, section 91J, information prohibited from disclosure. So I'm going to have a motion to move to close. Councillor Wilbur, second Councillor Dober. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So we'll take a 5 or 10 minute recess to allow Carl to get the equipment closed off, and we'll go back to closed.